welcome to One.
Hello, my name's Liwei Wang. I'm a dual degree student between the School of Architecture and the School of Management, and I graduated in 2020. Chinatown Stories came out of an architecture studio in my second year. It was done with two partners, Winston Yuan and Ray Wu, both of whom who have graduated in 2019. And basically, it was a studio focused about urbanism in New York City. And we chose Chinatown and Manhattan as our study of focus. It's basically a research project investigating the unique qualities of urbanism in Chinatown through the lens of often ignored artifacts of architecture and urbanism, like takeout menus, signage, pop culture representation.
So what is your background and what drew you to Yale and what have you done while at Yale?
So I did a bachelor's in architecture at the University of Waterloo in Ontario. And doing a master's just kind of felt like the natural transition for me. It's a requirement if I wanted to practice as an architect. I was really drawn to Yale, actually mostly because of the building and the sense of community that I felt when I visited here.
Can you tell us a bit more about specific pieces of Chinatown Stories?
We kind of imagine Chinatown Stories as a mini exhibition with many different components into it. It uses a bunch of techniques and it's really a multimedia work. One of the main pieces of it is a street map of Manhattan that Winston made. And he basically went on Google Maps and screen captured every business that had a Chinese sign on it and plotted it on this map of downtown Manhattan. And from this, you can, from zoomed out, you can kind of see a heat map of where Chinese businesses are and therefore a proxy for the Chinese community. But if you zoom in, what I really like about it is that it's kind of like a tapestry or texture of the kind of aesthetics that Chinatown is all about. So the project was really focused on the past, present, and the future of Chinatown. So for the past and the present, we analyzed what had happened and what was already there. Example of this can be seen in this blue Doyer Street section drawing, where we cut through a really legendary street in Chinatown, which is a bend that a lot of history has happened on. In this drawing, you can see that I collapsed many different events into one timeline or one drawing. So for example, in the Doyer Street section drawing, it shows a tunnel that the triads used to escape from police detection back in the early 1900s. But it also shows fictional events that took place on the street. For example, the movie Premium Rush, which was filmed in 2012. We also produced a lot of artifacts that were kind of commentary or describing what the future of Chinatown could be. A fun thing we made was this mock board game called General Tsao's Imperial Conquest. The concept behind it is that the three Chinatowns are trying to agglomerate power and take over all of Manhattan. We had made up all of these funny cards that dealt with stereotypes in the Chinese American community. For example, you would get points if you sent your kids to an Ivy League college. We also made this kind of scroll drawing about the future of Chinatown. And what that was doing was we took a picture of what Chinatown currently was and basically imagined what it would look like if all of the businesses kind of exploded skyward. It's kind of a vision for how the specific urbanism in Chinatown might accelerate.
So what was your intention for exhibiting the work?
We really wanted it to have a little bit more of an impact outside of an academic studio setting. That was part of the impetus for submitting it to the Asian American Art Showcase put on by Sci-City, which was of course cut short by COVID. I personally think that it would be really great to get this project exhibited in the community that it was inspired by.
And speaking of the impact, what would you want someone who views your project to take away either about Chinatown or more broadly?
I think that going to this, even I had a few prejudices about Chinatown. I grew up in the West, so I had certain standards for what I thought was attractive aesthetically. Through a rigorous look at how the forces driving the unique urbanism in Chinatown, I've begun to change a lot of my own standards about about these things, and hopefully through this project, I can change how other people feel too. A good example of this is that in many Chinese businesses, instead of printing a professional sign in their shop, they would just take 8.5 by 11s and print one letter really big on each of them and sort of put that up on a wall. I used to think that that was so ugly, but now I look at it and I think, wow, that's actually a design choice based on resourcefulness as an aesthetic. And I think it's really fabulous.
How have your experiences with Chinatowns impacted your work?
When I was living in Manhattan, I actually lived in Chinatown for about 4 or 5 months. And I think that was probably a huge inspiration for doing this project. But of course, I've had my own experiences with Chinatowns in Canada, which are very similar, but maybe differ depending on how much of a Chinese community is embedded in the city that the Chinatown's in. So, for example, in Vancouver, there's a very robust Chinese community, and I feel that the Chinatown there serves more as almost like a historical district rather than a working Chinatown where people would do most of their groceries.
What are your thoughts on the representations of Chinatown in popular culture?
I think that the Chinatown's usually painted a few ways. It's always seen as a place of otherness. So it's either seen as a place where there's kind of like underground crime happening, seediness, gambling in back rooms at tea houses, or it's kind of seen as a place where people buy knockoff designer bags, sunglasses, etc. Or it's kind of often used as comic relief. But I think it's just an enclave, an ethnic enclave like any other, and it has a lot of very interesting things about it that often go unnoticed, which is a lot of things that Chinatown Stories kind of picks up and says, "Hey, this is actually an artifact worth studying."